Another thing, too, that I think we should all be afraid of, I think that the leadership of the Israeli government, not just Netanyahu, but the likes of Smotrich and Ben Gavir and these other right-wing extremists who have been convicted of anti-Arab and anti-Muslim hate crimes, felonies, and who now lead the Israeli government, I think that they are crazy enough to use nuclear weapons. And so I think that should be our next great fear.
In this recent interview with Nima, John Kiriakou pulls back the curtain on the hidden forces shaping global events. He explores how the American political establishment has lost its grip, why party labels are increasingly meaningless, and how the public is beginning to see through the illusion of choice. Drawing on his years in intelligence and government, Kiriakou reveals the deeper dynamics at play beneath the headlines.
First of all, you're correct. It's all about ideology. There are more Americans who call themselves independents than there are Democrats or Republicans. People ask me what political party I'm a member of. I am an independent, truly. But I was a third generation Democrat. My grandparents came because of Franklin Roosevelt. Democrats, through the Vietnam War, my parents were opposed to the war. They were supportive of civil rights. I left the Democratic Party. So we've gotten to a point in the country where ideology is more important than party politics, and it's making the parties crazy. They want so much to be able to make this a two-party system again, but they don't know how to do it. And they don't know how to do it because they're unwilling to address the issues, the kinds of issues that Charlie Kirk was raising, for example. Point two is, whether we like to admit it to ourselves or not, we have a very, very violent society. I served in Bahrain for 2 years, two of the happiest years of my life. And the Emir of Bahrain at the time, Sheikh Isa bin Salman Al Khalifa, was a very kind and generous man. He used to open up his beach house on the weekends for diplomats to go swim, and your wives could wear a bikini and nobody would stare at them. And the Emir would always invite us over to have tea. One time, it was right after the Oklahoma City bombing, got that attack. So the conventional wisdom was that that it's not a Muslim who did this. And I said, "Oh, Your Highness, I say the same thing every day. It would be so bad for us, for all of us." And he said, "The thing about you Americans, you have an unusually violent society, even by Arab standards." He said, "You are accepting of violence that would be unacceptable in any other civilized country." And I didn't know how to respond to that because he was right. "Oh, you don't like Charlie Kirk's talks? Shoot him in the neck. You don't like Capitol Hill politics? Go to the congressional softball game and shoot as many members of Congress as you can. You want to make a political point about gun control? Go into a school and open fire on children. Because the law is not going to change. Nobody's going to stop you. Nobody's going to ban guns. Nobody's going to make mandatory registration. Nobody's going to do anything." So I think that the reason why people are falling away from the political parties is because the political parties don't affect change in any way. The American people really do want change. The parties aren't willing to do it. The parties are essentially two sides of the same coin. A lot of people disagree with me, Nima, when I say this, but I worked on Capitol Hill for years. I worked in the CIA for 15 years. I served overseas for my country. I've come to realize that there's really no major difference between the two political parties. You can tell that there are little differences around the edge. Maybe a little bit about abortion, maybe a little bit about the economy or taxes. But essentially, these two parties are the same party, two sides of the same coin. And people are coming to realize that, and they're tired of it.
Kiriakou exposes the vast reach of Israeli intelligence inside Iran, describing a sprawling network of thousands of informants and operatives. He explains how Mossad built these networks using Afghan refugees and local assets, and why dismantling them is nearly impossible for Iranian authorities. The compartmentalized structure of these spy rings ensures that even if one is discovered, the others remain hidden, demonstrating the scale of covert operations that rarely make the news.
By some accounts, the Israelis have between 200 and 220 million, 200 and 220 nuclear warheads. I think we should believe them when they say that there's no way that they'll lose a war. I think that we should believe them when they threaten Iran with nuclear war. And so the only thing that's going to keep them from doing that is pressure, real pressure from the United States. I'm glad to see Donald Trump pressuring Israel right now, but I don't know if this is a 1 day or 1 week, event, or if this is going to be U.S. policy. I want to add too, Nima, that I am colossally disappointed in the leadership of the Democratic Party. Some of them talk a good game. Most of them remain silent in the face of this genocide in Gaza. But then when Netanyahu comes to the United States, they literally run. There are films of them running to the room where Netanyahu was appearing so they could take a picture with him. It makes me sick to my stomach to think of it. Another thing too, and I think we're having an impact. Forgive me for personalizing this, but I think this is important. I was mentioned in a publication this past week that I've never heard of before, called the Middle East Forum. I was criticized by the political advisor to the Israeli foreign minister. He called me virulently anti-Semitic. That, first of all, that's one of the most ridiculous things anybody has ever said about me. It's just comical. Virulently anti-Semitic. Okay. Anybody who doesn't toe the Israeli line 100% is an anti-Semite. I get that that's the Israeli script right now. But he said that my position on Israel shows the rot that is taking hold in the intellectual class of the American left. I took that to be a compliment, because to me that means people on the American political left, which is really a centrist position, people on the American left are finally coming around and seeing with open eyes what it is that the Israelis are doing to helpless Palestinians. You destroy the entire Gaza Strip. You destroy every hospital. You destroy the electrical grid. You destroy the water treatment facilities. You kill 70,000, 100,000, 150,000 people, most of whom are women and children, almost all of whom are civilians, and you're proud of that? So I'm proud, at least, to be a part of the rotting American intellectual left. I'm going to wear that as a badge of honor. Kudos first to the Israelis for this counterintelligence network that they had in Iran. By all accounts, it was thousands, literally thousands of people reporting clandestinely back to the Mossad. We know now, this is what the Iranian government has turned up, that many of these people, thousands of people, were Afghan refugees who were in Iran illegally or didn't have documentation, and were probably offered the equivalent of $50 a month or $100 a month, money well spent, to just tell the Israelis where the nuclear scientists lived, where the generals lived, what time the generals left their apartment buildings in the morning to go to work. I mean, all these, it's called the mosaic concept, where you have just a little tile, a little piece of information, but then you put it all together at Mossad headquarters and you come up with an entire picture. And that's what made Israeli targeting so much easier. The Iranians have broken up a lot of this. There have been some executions. There have been a handful of trials. There have been imprisonments. But I would have to think that it's impossible to get all of them, that there are still people reporting back to the Israelis, besides those Israeli Mossad officers who are ethnic Persians and who speak Farsi without an accent and who are able to blend into Iranian society. This is going to be a very, very difficult thing for the Iranian government to dig these spies up and root them out. But it's also something that the Israelis have been working on for years. This isn't something that you implement overnight. It's a program that takes years to develop. And another thing too, this is something that I think the Iranians should think about. The Afghan refugees who were recruited by Mossad were not recruited by long distance telephone call from Israel to Iran. They were recruited in person. Right? There are people inside Iran today acting as spy masters and running these networks. And I guarantee you that the networks are compartmentalized. They are stovepiped. So one network doesn't know what the other network is doing. One network doesn't know what the other network's orders or instructions are. Why? Because if one network is discovered and everybody is rounded up and arrested, they'll never tell what the other network is doing because they don't have any idea, just in case they needed to fight against the Iranians, and it worked out. The only thing that stopped the Israelis, I think, was, if you listen to Donald Trump, was because the U.S. bombed Iran on Israel's behalf. Donald Trump said that Benjamin Netanyahu said that if the United States didn't bomb the Iranian nuclear sites, that the Israelis would use a tactical nuclear weapon because they didn't have a conventional weapon big enough, powerful enough to destroy a deep underground site. But imagine if they had used a nuclear weapon. That would change the world. The whole world would change if a nuclear weapon were to be deployed against Iran. And so the Iranians have a lot of work to do when it comes to trying to disrupt and dismantle this, what appears to be an enormous Israeli intelligence operation on Iranian soil. We're not talking just about recruiting the random Iranian nuclear scientist who goes to Europe for some seminar. We're talking about giant networks on the ground all across Iran.
Reflecting on the risks ahead, Kiriakou warns that the current leadership in Israel may be reckless enough to consider nuclear options, raising the stakes for the entire region. He urges viewers to look beyond official narratives and recognize the complex, often unseen forces driving today's conflicts. As the world faces new dangers, Kiriakou's insights remind us that the real story is often the one we're not being told.